to do that yet, but he said he wouldn't rule it out. He said he'd, quote, look at the facts, noting he and Combs used to have a friendly relationship, but the two haven't spoken in years.
He used to really like me a lot.
He said, if I determine that somebody has been mistreated by the government, I would absolutely consider a pardon.
Picture this, a courtroom packed with reporters and legal experts. Diddy's trial is already under intense scrutiny when Trump suddenly makes an appearance, virtually or verbally, depending on the reports. Out of nowhere, he suggests a pardon. Everyone's asking one question: why now?
Back when you hosted The Apprentice, you mentioned once in 2012 that Diddy was a good friend of yours back then. He has since found himself in some very serious legal trouble.
Yeah, that's true.
Would you ever consider pardoning him?
Well, nobody's asked. You had to be the one to ask, Peter, but nobody's asked. But I know people are thinking about it. I know they're thinking about it. I think some people have been very close to asking. First of all, I look at what's happening, and I haven't been watching it too closely, although it's certainly getting a lot of coverage. I haven't seen him. I haven't spoken to him in years. He used to really like me a lot, but I think when I ran for politics, that relationship busted up. From what I read, I don't know, he didn't tell me that, but I'd read some little bit nasty statements in the paper all of a sudden. You know, it's different. You become a much different person when you run for politics and you do what's right. I could do other things, and I'm sure he'd like me, and I'm sure other people would like me, but it wouldn't be as good for our country. As we said, our country's doing really well because of what we're doing. So it's not a popularity contest. So, I don't know, I would certainly look at the facts. If I think somebody was mistreated, whether they like me or don't like me, it wouldn't have any impact on me.
Okay, so wanted to let you listen to that exchange there. That was asked by Peter Doocy, and whether or not the president would consider a pardon of Sean Diddy Combs, with the caveat, of course, if he were to be convicted here. He essentially said he hasn't really thought about it. He's got to see the facts, but he didn't rule it out.
The courtroom atmosphere was heavy, the kind of quiet where every shuffle or cough seemed amplified. Reporters sat ready, their pens poised to catch the next update in a trial already drawing nationwide attention. Diddy was there at the defense table, his posture tense, his face set in a carefully controlled expression. The testimony was proceeding as expected when news broke that would shatter the day's proceedings. The courtroom murmurs began faintly, rippling through the seated gallery until people realized what had just surfaced. Former President Donald Trump had made a statement about the trial. It wasn't a vague comment or a carefully worded acknowledgement. According to sources, Trump's words were clear and direct, delivered through his spokesperson during an impromptu press conversation. He mentioned, and I quote, "If it comes to it, if Diddy needs it, a pardon isn't off the table." Simple, bold, and perfectly calculated to draw ears. No subtlety, but that's rarely Trump's style. The news hit the courtroom like a crack of thunder. First, Diddy's reaction. Reserved, but very noticeable. His attorneys leaned in, whispering rapidly, even heatedly, as the ripple of murmurs broke out around them. The judge lifted their eyes sharply over the courtroom, scanning for signs that decorum might break down entirely. Even the prosecution appeared caught off guard, their careful focus cracking for a moment. None of this was in any legal script for the day. It was chaos unfolding in real time. In the gallery, a few gasps could be heard. Others exchanged whispers in tones just low enough to avoid drawing reprimands. The room wasn't sure how to process this. Was it grandstanding from Trump? A political play? Or did it mean something real for Diddy's high-stakes fight? What was clear was that it wasn't supposed to happen. Court hearings don't typically involve the specter of former presidents offering pardons mid-trial, let alone such high-profile cases. It created a sense of disbelief and confusion no one could mask. The weight of Trump's statement became immediately apparent. Diddy is currently facing a series of serious charges, the kind that, if proven, could lead to lengthy consequences. His defense has been trying to paint a picture of doubt, of the cracks in the prosecution's arguments. Now the splash of a potential pardon threw yet another issue into the legal waters. A presidential pardon could entirely erase a conviction, making the proceedings feel outright irrelevant at worst and overshadowed at best. So why now? The timing was curious. Trump's legal troubles continue swirling, and his relationship with figures in entertainment has always been complicated. Was this an attempt to curry favor, to draw focus elsewhere, or something more pointed, a message to a specific audience? The courtroom might have regained its quiet eventually, but the real question lingered in every corner.
Ryan, the pardon power, obviously one of the president's favorite tools right now, flexing his muscles again this week with a series of high-profile pardons, many of them controversial. President Trump just yesterday was asked if he would consider pardoning Sean Diddy Combs if he's found guilty of racketeering and sex trafficking. What did the president say?
Yeah, Peter, the president said he hasn't been asked to do that yet, but he said he wouldn't rule it out. He said he'd, quote, look at the facts, noting he and Combs used to have a friendly relationship, but the two haven't spoken in years. Combs, of course, has not been convicted, but he is facing trial right now for charges that could lead to life in prison, including sex trafficking.
That is so interesting, because if there are Trump supporters and he makes an insinuation even that the government has overreached, say, in racketeering, they might buy into it just because they're Trump supporters.
But it is his government now, right? It's his Justice Department. So it's his prosecutors who are prosecuting this one now. No, they did not initiate this case. But in other cases that they did not initiate, like the Eric Adams prosecution, when his DOJ came in, they kneecapped that one. They had it dismissed. This one, Jay Clayton and that the prosecutors from that district went forward. So, that's his DOJ. They had to at least approve the trial, I would assume. I don't think Pam Bondi just let this happen without knowing. So, I think it's just President Trump doing what he does often, which is just speak off the cuff. It works well for him. But I think that's all that was. I don't think there's really too much to it. I'm pretty sure no one has approached him.
Yet you said.
If you're enjoying this story, kindly do us a favor and subscribe to our channel. It is free and won't cost anything, but it means the world to us. We're just a small channel trying to grow. Thank you, and back to the video.
They're close to it. I heard you say that, and Trump insinuated that too. Yes, you did, or a little bit.
No, I said that's what he was saying. They're close to it.
What does that mean?
But they're close to it. I don't know if they're close to it, Harvey. I really don't. I wouldn't. I have no information. There's a guy on the right that might be able to help us, but he can't help us.
That's what I'm thinking. Hey,
He'll
Mark.
get in trouble.
Mark,
So-
I know, Mark. This is a political and not a legal issue.
So can we go back to 23.1 for a second? Why is it in New York, nobody, I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to get me into talking about
Politics.
It's crazy.
I could say quite a bit about this for a variety of reasons, but I'm going to just, in deference to his honor, in deference to my firstborn, who I love dearly, I'm going to return to asking Joe what he thinks about 23.1 and why it hasn't been challenged.
I don't know. It should be challenged. There's no practical basis for it, and here especially. So I don't know the answer to that, Mark. I really don't, and it should be challenged. But it's crazy. But you're doing the right thing, obviously, because you want to make sure that you don't ruffle any feathers. And your daughter, by the way, your daughter's a terrific lawyer. Tenny is. I'm very impressed. There's people who are children of great lawyers who become lawyers, and it's not the same.
The way you and I know I'm sure we're reading each other's minds right now, but I that's why I take that as high praise for her. So I appreciate
she is. She's something else. I'm very impressed with her. That opening was phenomenal. And that's my opening summations and cross is my daily bread. It's what I love and it's what I study and what I really I think I perfected it. And that was as good as I've seen. So
The moment Trump's comment about a possible pardon reached the courtroom, the reaction was immediate and electric. The murmurs that had started quietly when the news first broke quickly built into a low hum of voices. Observers in the public gallery leaned toward each other, their expressions ranging from shock to barely contained excitement. A few gasps were audible, even as others in the room appeared to struggle to keep their composure. The energy shifted palpably. The room felt less like a somber legal proceeding and more like the aftermath of a plot twist no one had seen coming. Diddy, seated at the defense table, kept his face carefully neutral. But his body language told a slightly different story. His shoulders, which had been tense for most of the day, seemed to relax, but only slightly, like he wasn't sure whether the news was a lifeline or a distraction. His hands, clasped tightly in front of him, didn't move. At one point, he exchanged a brief glance with his lead attorney. It wasn't relief exactly, but something about his posture hinted he knew the courtroom dynamics had just shifted in a way no one could ignore. The defense team, however, was another story. Several attorneys leaned in toward each other almost instantly, their voices low but urgent. It wasn't clear what they were saying, but their body language suggested they were weighing options, or at least running the implications in their heads. Was this an advantage they could exploit? Should they address it directly? For now, they stayed quiet, outwardly appearing composed as they tracked the reactions unfolding in the rest of the room. On the other side of the aisle, the prosecution looked visibly frustrated. One of the lead prosecutors leaned back in their chair, their lips pressed tightly together as they exchanged words with a colleague. Their expression betrayed a flicker of disbelief, perhaps even irritation, but they maintained professionalism. That didn't stop the tension from creeping into their posture, though. For them, this comment wasn't just unexpected, it had the potential to upend months of building their case. The judge, observing the swell of whispers and unease in the room, quickly intervened. They raised their voice with authority, reminding everyone in attendance that courtroom decorum must be maintained. The gavel struck to emphasize the point. For a moment, the room fell silent again, though the air was still thick with unspoken questions and lingering disbelief. The judge's focus remained steady, intent on steering things back to the legal process at hand. Any hint of personal reaction from the bench was notably absent. Despite the temporary calm, it was clear that the proceedings had derailed. The sense of order that had existed earlier in the day was gone, replaced by a buzz of confusion and anticipation. Observers exchanged glances, some barely able to stifle their astonishment. The implication of Trump's comment hung in the air. Did it send a message to Diddy's legal team? Did it distract the prosecution? Or would it ultimately backfire in the broader context of the trial? This unexpected moment didn't just rattle the courtroom, it shifted the tone of the entire day. Every participant inside that room, from the attorneys to the spectators, seemed unable to shake the weight of what had just happened. The trial briefly paused, but one question lingered. Would Trump's words prove to be a gift to Diddy, or a new hurdle to overcome?
That he hasn't been asked formally, but it sounds like he said people were sniffing around about possibly doing this. And then in the end, he said, if I determine that somebody has been mistreated by the government, I would absolutely consider a pardon. So, Mark, you were right in the middle of the Hunter Biden pardon. I know this. And you knew about it long before it broke, is my recon. So you know something about this or not. You are, in some way associated with the lawyers, and one of whom is your daughter on the Diddy side. Has there been an overture? Because now that I start thinking about it, with the Chrisleys and all these other people, this is not the craziest thing, even though it seems pretty crazy. Has there been any outreach?
Joe, I've got a question for you. Suck me into a
That's the hot potato.
23.1 here. I have a question, Joe. I don't understand. You practice in New York, famously practice in New York, and condolences. I think Bernie Carrick died today, and I think you were very close to him, at least at one point. I haven't talked to you about it. If you were, and I think you were, I have my condolences. I don't understand. And Harvey and I talked about this for 2 podcasts, and he slammed me the first time, and then the listeners slammed him. So I already did the reason, my kind of analysis as to why it's unconstitutional. What is perplexing to me is it was re-upped, meaning they once again had this local rule 23.1. And one of the comments was the dearth or some language like that about any case decisions, meaning nobody has challenged this. Why has nobody challenged 23.1 in New York? You guys aren't shrinking violence. I don't understand.
I'm going to object. I asked a question, and you just simply ignored my question.
He was so far off your question, Harvey. I don't even remember what your question was.
Okay, so hold on. So then I'll address.
Good job, Mark.
I'm sorry, Mark, but you can't. You're just ignoring me.
We'll come around to you first.
No. Let's. Joe, can you answer my question? Do you because here's what I'm thinking, that he is as much as said, Diddy started taking shots at me when I started running for office, and he used to like me a lot. And the way things are feeling with the backdrop, if Diddy starts to like him again a lot, that this could be his safety net. Am I crazy here?
You're not crazy. I mean, look, it's clear from the president's words, and I know how he speaks, I decipher the code. No one has approached him. No one has approached him, but he knows that people are thinking about approaching him, and they're thinking about saying something, and they're close to saying something, but no one has. So that's I think a message is basically saying, if you get back in line, and if you do what you used to do, which is adore me, we'll consider it. Whatever. He's got to have people around him that are going to look. Ultimately, the one thing about President Trump, he makes the final call, no matter what. His advisors are just that, advisors. They're not people who make ultimate decisions, but people will advise him on that. It wouldn't be a popular case if a jury convicts here to do that. But here's the thing: if I'm Diddy and I'm Diddy's lawyers, and Tenny and Mark Ignifilo and the crew, this is the last thing I want to hear. This is the last thing I want out before, in the press with the jury, because God forbid a jury is like, oh, So even if we convict him, he's going to get off anyway. Oh, all right. Well, then it's not that big of a deal. He's not going to spend life in prison. He's going to get a pardon, but we're going to convict him anyway because he's proven to be a bad guy. He's proven to be unlikable. He's proven to have done some horrific things. If at the end of the day, he's not going to spend life in jail anyway because, he's going to get pardoned by the president.
Outside the courtroom, Trump's statement quickly became the centerpiece of heated debates among legal experts and political commentators. Some saw it as a calculated move that added a layer of complexity to an already high-profile case. Others outright condemned it, calling it an unprecedented interference in the justice system's processes. The reactions were as varied as they were intense, with no shortage of opinions about what it all might mean for Diddy or for Trump himself. Supporters of Trump's bold pronouncement argued that insinuating a possible pardon wasn't unethical, but rather within his rights as a former president. They claimed it sent a clear message about his willingness to intervene in cases he views as politically or culturally significant. To them, this wasn't about legal protocol, but demonstrating loyalty to someone with influence, a move that might strengthen connections with certain communities or high-profile figures. On the other hand, critics called it reckless and inappropriate, stating that it undermined trust in the judicial process. Prominent voices, including legal analyst Jeff Rosenthal, pointed out that such a statement, even hypothetically, walks the line of turning justice into a political tool. When you have someone connected to prominent entertainment figures discussing pardons mid-trial, Rosenthal remarked, you blur the already fragile boundary between fair legal proceedings and celebrity influence. The procedural implications raised even more questions. Could this statement impact the impartiality of Diddy's trial? Some experts suggested it might. The mere idea of an intervention, no matter the likelihood, could plant seeds of doubt about the fairness of the case in the minds of the public or even the jury. While judges and lawyers are trained to focus on evidence alone, they aren't immune to pressures stirred by public perception. For Diddy's legal team, this statement might subtly bolster their narrative, especially if they argue that outside forces are shining a politicized spotlight on the trial. Still, the legal logistics of a presidential pardon aren't quite as straightforward as some might think. Legal scholar Tanya Hill pointed out that offering a pardon without a conviction, and doing so while legal proceedings are ongoing, would pose significant challenges. More than that, it could be interpreted as an attempt to sideline due process. Even the power to pardon has boundaries, Hill explained. Past controversies involving high-profile pardons have shown that they can lead to professional repercussions for those involved. Trump's insertion into Diddy's trial risks creating even more attention and not the kind that helps resolve matters quietly. Historically, cases where outside figures attempt to influence legal outcomes don't always fare well. Some analysts compared Trump's statement to previous instances where public figures became intertwined with legal scandals, noting how the media response often shifted the trajectory of public opinion and sometimes the trial itself. Whether Trump's comment helps or hinders Diddy's case remains speculative, but the fallout has undeniably set a precedent for legal observers and onlookers alike. The true impact, that remains to be seen.
You're complaining that nobody's challenged it. You could challenge it. Why don't you challenge it?
If Tenny was not involved, I would, and I would do it.
He's right, Harvey. He's right, Harvey. He's right. I mean,
I'm not going to do it with my daughters in
that's all.
In the headlights. It just wouldn't. I mean, it's already. I've already quipped sometimes when I wish I had taken it back. But Joe, I have another question for you along those lines. Harvey's not going to jump into the middle of this again and try and shut me down when I ask the question. Haven't you always thought that? And I've made this argument. I want to hear if you think I'm on the line. That this, I always talk about the genesis of these, I don't, 23.1 isn't necessarily a gag order, but it's this idea in
recent years. Which are unconstitutional, by the way.
Right, exactly. And in recent years, it's always of the defense. But the genesis is Shepard versus Maxwell, which F. Lee Bailey made his bones on, which was to reverse a conviction to protect a defendant's right to a fair trial. Where in the world did this get turned upside down that now the prosecutors, who, by the way, have enough handmaidens out in the media cheerleading for them, speaking of which, Nancy Grace and you yesterday, which, by the way, do you have that clip? You got to play the clip, Harvey. You cannot let our listeners
go to Tubi. You can watch it for free. It's called United States versus Sean Combs inside the Diddy trial, and it is
Okay,
something.
so I watched, and Nancy was going wild about, what was she saying, Joe, about your eyes?
I mean, aside from screaming at me to the point where I couldn't even understand what she was screaming, I did finally hear her say, "What are you going to start with those wild eyes again?" Because I was like, exactly, I was really being animated and like, "Nancy, you don't know the law. You don't know the law." She, "Oh, there you go with those wild eyes again." And I took the bait.
Oh, you like that. Like that.
And no, don't step on the punchline. And you said,
I don't recall.
He said, "At least my eyes move."
He did say that.
Trump's statement about a potential pardon has undoubtedly shifted the dynamics of Diddy's case. For Diddy's defense team, it opens new angles to consider, both in their courtroom strategy and in controlling the public narrative. The mention of a pardon, even as a hypothetical, doesn't just add uncertainty, it injects something powerful into the proceedings. Doubt. Doubt about the necessity of the trial, doubt about the fairness of the system, and even doubt about whether a clean conviction would ultimately hold any weight. These are threads the defense might pull at subtly, reshaping how the jury and public interpret the trial's outcome. From a strategic standpoint, the defense could argue that the prosecution is chasing a case undermined by larger forces. Even if this isn't said outright, the very knowledge of a potential pardon creates an undercurrent that might make overly confident arguments by the prosecutors feel excessive. In this context, reasonable doubt doesn't just apply to evidence. It could extend to the overall purpose of the trial itself. Any belief that Diddy might have an escape route could subtly work in his favor, softening the resolve of some jurors or reshaping how they weigh guilt versus the role of outside influence. But this isn't without risk. Trump's comment has also placed a spotlight squarely on the trial in a way that could put additional pressure on the prosecution. The mention of a pardon might shift their approach, making them even more meticulous in presenting their case to ensure any resulting conviction appears beyond reproach. Some observers suggest this might complicate matters for Diddy, as the defense team now has to navigate an environment where prosecutors might feel compelled to overprove their case. Any sign of leniency or sloppiness on their part could be amplified under the watchful eye of the media and the public. For Diddy himself, the psychological impact of this kind of development can't be ignored. Knowing that someone as high profile as Trump has brought up the possibility of stepping in could be seen as a morale boost. It suggests powerful individuals are paying attention to his case. On the other hand, it adds a layer of uncertainty and maybe even stress. Relying on external events that fall outside legal strategy brings risks and distractions, and there's no guarantee such talk will amount to real action. In the meantime, it could fuel speculation and criticism, adding to the growing pressures surrounding him. Media coverage, predictably, has already amplified the statement in ways that could affect the jury pool and public opinion. Whenever political figures intersect with celebrity cases, the line between justice and spectacle becomes blurry. Some have speculated that this might even delay proceedings, as attorneys on both sides consider motions or requests to address the influence of external factors, like Trump's remark. Diddy's team, so far, has kept quiet publicly about whether they plan to leverage this, but that silence may be strategic in itself. Supporters and peers in the entertainment industry have also reacted, with many voicing their opinions on social media. Some see Trump's statement as a sign of solidarity or even validation of Diddy's position, while others question the intentions behind it. And for analysts, this moment raises even more questions. Does Trump's involvement point to a larger agenda, or is it just another headline-grabbing stunt? Whether this intervention saves Diddy or simply adds more chaos remains an open question.
He did say that. Hey, Joe.
By the way, that's not Joe's best. That's not Joe's best.
It was a good line. It was a good
Joe's
line.
best line is on camera in Aesop Rocky in the criminal courts building when Lewin said something. He said, "Oh, you're going to go get reversed again in the Ninth Circuit."
For lying to a jury.
Yeah, he said, "Stop with the steroids." And Joe, without missing a beat, says, "Well, look, hey, hunchback."
I said, John, it's not steroid. It's just eating well. I work out very hard. I eat well. You should try once in a while. Grab a salad instead of a donut, you fat fuck, and you won't have that big hangover belly and the hunchback. And that happened to all take place on camera, by the way. But he started.
Oh, my God.
I don't start, but I do finish.
Hey, Joe. It seems like the prosecution made some headway this week on racketeering. That you look at Diddy and you start hearing about arson and kidnapping, especially from Capricorn Clark, where she is talking about, threatened to end up in the East River, that Diddy goes wild when he finds out that she used to work with Suge Knight, takes her to a vacant building for 5 days, gives her a lie detector, with all of his associates. It's feeling racketeering-y to me.
It's feeling Diddy to me. Look, a racketeering enterprise is a racketeering enterprise. It's not a lunatic who is a jealous boyfriend, a control freak, and not a nice guy, a domestic batterer, someone who acts like a piece of garbage to his employees. That's not what a racketeer is. That doesn't make it a racketeering act, Harvey. I don't see that as an act in furtherance of a racketeering scheme. This has a racketeering enterprise, which is traditionally, understand, it's for a criminal organization, right? So an enterprise that's established to commit crimes. Bad Boy Records in no way, shape, or form was established for that purpose. It doesn't turn into a criminal enterprise because one person in that organization commits some crimes. So I still think there's a big gap here where, look, bad guy, proven, criminal, proven, domestic batterer, proven, drug abuser, proven, all those things, they've proven. We're in federal court though, okay? And we have a racketeering sex trafficking trial. And I think there's a big void in the evidence. That's why we keep seeing that Cassie video over and over and over again. It's not evidence of racketeering. It's not evidence of anything but a domestic assault, which it is. It's a disgusting video. But again, I know if Nancy here, she'd be screaming at me and saying, "Oh, it's racketeering," or Ashley Banfield
holding up a Tootsie Roll,
right, Tootsie Roll, whatever that meant. And Ashley Banfield saying, what a racketeering act is, even though there's no enterprise. You really have to understand the law before you can opine on this stuff.
So let me ask you something about that. I get the mafia, has kind of a below.
It's not just the mafia.
I know. But it's you could have a front organization that seems legit, but underneath it, they're running a drug ring, they're running a hitman ring, they're running something that's a criminal organization. But at a point, could a jury say, look, it's not a specific crime organization, to sell drugs or guns or hit people or do hits on people, but he is using Bad Boy and all of the people under him in Bad Boy to commit crimes, that Bad Boy is being used for Diddy to always get his way no matter what it takes. If they look at Bad Boy that way, if they look at it like it is just a tool of Diddy's to get what he wants at all costs and violate the law.
In the aftermath of Trump's statement, the paths forward for both him and Diddy seem to be shrouded in uncertainty, but they're bound to intertwine further. For Trump, the immediate question is whether this comment opens him up to legal or political backlash. His history of making controversial, off-script remarks is nothing new, but this one touched on active legal proceedings, raising concerns about judicial interference. Legal experts say that while a president's ability to issue pardons is broad, openly discussing one for an ongoing trial is highly unusual and could spark ethical and procedural scrutiny. Critics argue it sets a dangerous precedent, even if Trump no longer holds the office. That brings us to whether Trump would actually pursue a pardon if Diddy were convicted. For one, it's not automatic. The process would require clear documentation after sentencing, and even then, it could face serious blowback if perceived as politically or personally motivated. Historically, presidential pardons have been highly scrutinized, especially in cases involving high-profile figures. While Trump has issued polarizing pardons in the past, doing so here would add to the narrative of selective justice, something even his supporters may find difficult to defend. On Diddy's side, the trial timeline could shift due to the ripple effect of the statement. Legal analysts suggest that his defense team might now attempt to leverage the comment in court, perhaps arguing that a potential pardon undermines the prosecution's stance on the gravity of the charges. At the very least, motions could be filed to address the sudden outside influence and its impact on the jury pool. If the trial gains more media traction because of Trump's comment, it could force delays as both sides reevaluate their strategies to manage the hypercharged atmosphere. So far, no additional public clarifications have come from Trump or his team, which isn't uncommon when statements like this spread on their own. By avoiding follow-ups, it leaves open the question of intent. Was this comment a deliberate political move or a thoughtless remark that spiraled out of control? Political commentators are split. While some see this as a way for Trump to bolster support in specific celebrity or cultural circles, others argue it's just another action in his pattern of impulsively dominating headlines, whatever the cost. Responses from the entertainment world have been equally divided. Some of Diddy's supporters have embraced the statement as validation of his innocence, indirectly endorsing the idea that his charges are exaggerated or unfair. In contrast, skeptics in both Hollywood and political circles view this as yet another example of blurring lines between justice and influence. The broader implications cannot be ignored. Could this moment reshape how public figures and politicians engage with ongoing trials? Is the influence of celebrity going to define legal proceedings even more boldly than before? For now, the trial is left with more questions than answers, and the bigger picture remains as unpredictable as ever. Trump's unexpected comment has cast a shadow over Diddy's trial, raising questions about its influence on both the legal process and public perception. His mention of a potential pardon has blurred the lines between justice and celebrity, creating debate while leaving the trial tangled in unexpected controversy. For now, the high-stakes drama only intensifies. What do you think? Was this a shrewd strategic move by Trump, or an impulsive statement with unintended consequences? Let us know in the comments below. With so many twists unfolding, this trial is far from over. Stick around as we follow every update. You won't want to miss what happens next.